So you're saying that carbohydrates are not good for you, are not good for your health, and they're not essential. Could you explain why? Like what happens at the cellular level when you eat a lot of carbohydrates?
Sure. All carbs are sugar. There's four types of carbohydrates. There's monosaccharides, disaccharides, oligosaccharides, and polysaccharides. And saccharide means sugar. So you got, single sugar, uh, two sugars. I don't know what oligo means. I've never heard of an oligosaccharide, but apparently it exists. And you got polysaccharides, many saccharides. Fiber is a polysaccharide. So it's actually sugar. You just can't digest it. So when you eat anything besides fiber, basically any kind of sugar, any kind of starch besides fiber, it breaks down into glucose or fructose. So with glucose, it's going to get into your blood, and if you are using glucose as your energy source, then it'll be taken into the cell by the enzymes to the mitochondria and turned into ATP. But any excess glucose that the cell can't use must remain in the blood because of glycation. So glycation is the non-enzymatic binding of sugar to protein, which causes dysfunction. And your blood vessels and your blood cells, your red blood cells and whatnot, they reproduce at a much higher rate than other cells in your body. So they're kind of like the sacrificial lamb. They're kept out, and the glucose is kept into the blood because the blood can take more of that glycation. In fact, glycation always happens in the blood because there's always glucose in your blood. But as long as you remain at homeostatic levels, it has mechanisms to keep the inflammation under control. But if it gets chronically elevated, then the glycation becomes chronic and you get inflammation. So, so as far as heart disease is concerned, atherosclerosis, I have to say that slowly, which is the plaque that builds up and causes a blockage, only occurs in the arteries. So you got arteries, which are coming away from the heart at very, very high blood pressure. And then you got the veins, which are bringing the blood back to the heart at lower pressure. So atherosclerosis only happens in the arteries, and it's because of that high blood pressure. So, and it only occurs in the arteries where where there's like a curvature in the artery, or they bifurcate, they break off into two. And that causes, if the artery is running straight, the shear stress, the vessel walls are designed to take that shear pressure going with the cell wall. But when it hits the bifurcation or the curvature, it causes turbulence. And so the vessel walls are glycated and inflamed, and they're irritated, and then they're getting blasted with this high pressure blood. And that's irritating them even further, and it creates kind of a callus, which we call atherosclerotic plaque. And it takes many, many years for that to develop into a serious issue. But eventually it will cause a blockage, or if the plaque doesn't become calcified and hardened, if it's soft, it might break off and travel through the blood up into your brain and cause a stroke. And that is, in essence, basically what heart disease is. So a lot of cardiologists have come to the conclusion that heart disease patients are also diabetic, whether they're diagnosed or not, and that's because it's the exact same pathology. You have chronically elevated blood sugar, which is the definition of diabetes, and the chronically elevated blood sugar causes the glycation, which causes the inflammation, which causes the buildup of the atherosclerotic plaque in these high turbulent areas of your arteries. So I forget what I was going to say next, but basically that's the same pathology, and and that's why you find that 75% of diabetics, type 2 diabetics, die of heart disease, because it's basically the same disease. It's chronically elevated blood sugar and the
Mhm.
associated glycation and inflammation.
So does cholesterol have anything to do with heart disease?
Blaming cholesterol is like blaming the firefighter for the fire. He's the
It's all
cholesterol
your
is,
fault,
yeah, yeah,
Stephen.
it's all my fault. The cholesterol is one of the mechanisms that exist in your blood to keep the inflammation that's inherent from the glycation that's in your normal blood sugar from doing lasting harm. So it's one of the mechanisms that keeps that glycation and inflammation under control. And so they say LDL cholesterol. LDL is not, it's not cholesterol. HDL is not cholesterol. Cholesterol is cholesterol. I've seen arguments that that in the atherosclerotic plaque, there's like it's like permeable, and when it's getting blasted by the high pressure blood, the LDL particles kind of seep into the plaque. That's why they find some LDL cholesterol in the plaque itself. But by and large, the root cause of the heart disease, of the plaque, is the inflammation caused by the glycation, caused by the chronically elevated blood glucose. There's nothing else behind it. If you didn't have that high blood pressure and that elevated blood sugar, then it wouldn't matter how high or how low your cholesterol was. There would be it's not like you dump bacon grease down into your sink, and then the bacon grease solidifies and clogs your sink. It's not like that at all. If that were the case, you would be more likely to get heart disease in the veins than in the arteries, because the veins have much lower pressure. But you almost never ever get heart disease in the veins. It's always in the arteries with high pressure.
So I think people usually think that HDL and LDL it's cholesterol. So what are those?
They're lipoproteins. Cholesterol is a type of fat, basically, and your blood is water based. So they don't, they're not it's not, the cholesterol is not water soluble. So the LDL and the HDL and their various there's VLDL and all these things. They are basically the vessels that carry the cholesterol through the blood to wherever it needs to be to do its job.
So what's the difference between HDL and LDL?
Just the size, just the density. It's high density and low density.
Because they call one it's good and the other one is bad, but we know that they're both vital for life.
Yeah. The only association you might find between the lipid, the HDL or LDL and heart disease in the blood work is a lot of people associate your HDL and triglyceride ratio to your propensity for heart disease. So if you have an HDL and triglyceride ratio at about 1:1, they consider that kind of healthy or not concerning. But if your triglycerides are way higher than your LDL, then triglycerides are pockets of fat, basically. So when your blood sugar is elevated, that creates a metabolic emergency. Like I said, it's damaging to the body. So the insulin converts the glucose into triglycerides, which are packets of fat that will be stored. So if you've got high triglyceride levels, then your body is producing a lot of insulin to get the sugar out of your body and to be stored as fat. And that's usually a pretty good indicator, one of the good indicators that you're consuming too much sugar or too much carbohydrates, and it's damaging your insides.
So it's funny because I put my mom on a meat-based diet. She still consumes some dairy, a little bit of dairy and vegetables because she likes to have a little bit of variety. But I find it's a success for me that she's finally eating animal proteins and a lot of proteins, and she's starting to go to the gym too. So very happy with that. So she went to the doctor and got a blood test done. Ended up her total cholesterol was around 300, but she had low triglycerides and high HDL cholesterol. So the ratio between the two was about 1.2, something like that. So she's considered healthy, not, she's not going to have a heart attack based on the numbers.
Probably not.
And only because the total cholesterol was at 300, the doctor insisted she has to absolutely take statins. Isn't that funny?
Yeah,
she's not even at risk of heart attack, and she has to take statins just to lower her cholesterol.
She didn't take his advice, I hope.
No, of course.
Okay. Yeah. They actually 300 used to be considered normal cholesterol. They actually lowered the number, actually lowered the optimal target cholesterol level, so that for that very purpose, so that you would have to prescribe more statins. They're actually doing the same thing now with obesity. They have changed the standard for what is considered obese, so that we've gone from like a 40% obesity level. Now they're saying 70% are obese. And the reason they did that is so they could push more GLP-1 inhibitor kind of type drugs, the Ozempic and everything. So it's all a scam. It's all a racket. I mean, frankly, I would encourage everybody to go strictly by how they feel. Don't worry about your blood markers. Don't worry about this or that. If you feel
Yeah.
fine, don't go to a doctor. If you're eating your species appropriate diet, which she more or less is, like people think I'm fundamentalist. I'm a fanatic about myself. I will never eat another vegetable. I will. I don't. This is my choice and my lifestyle, and this is what I do. But like, I mean, first of all, I would like we talked about earlier. It's almost disastrous to move someone from a standard Western diet into carnivore immediately, because it would just cause a whole slew of problems. So I would never do that to begin with. As a coach, I would be perfectly satisfied first and foremost if I could get them off the standard American diet or standard Western diet and just eating what I was eating when I made my first transition, when I was just like paleo. So if they were just eating, I mean, I wouldn't recommend them eating sweet potatoes, but if they're eating sweet potatoes and no longer eating ultra processed foods and seed oils and sugars, then I'll take that as a win, and we can level up later on if we wanted to. We could talk about, things that are still going on, and how, cutting back even those carbs even more can help them if they wanted to. But that's just a huge step right there. I think if everybody cut out the ultra processed foods, seed oils, the wheat, and the grains, and the sugar, we would
Yes.
probably put the pharmaceutical industry out of business, because even with people take pictures of people in the 50s and 60s and 70s, and they're all pretty lean and everything, but there were still pretty high rates of disease back then, just not epidemic levels. But humans didn't even develop chronic disease until agriculture came around, when we started growing grains and stuff like that. These calorie foods, like calories are all that matters for your survival, and we didn't really find heart disease and cancer and things like that until we started examining Egyptian mummies. So they were growing lots of grain, and that's where the real chronic disease problem really started, when agriculture came around. Our brains got smaller, our stature got shorter. But if I could just get people to start off just by getting those grains and the seed oils and the sugar out of their diet, that would be an enormous improvement in the overall health of our species. Like, we would basically, bring ourselves back from the abyss. I mean, we're in a lot of trouble right now as a species.